This is 2A Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin reporting live. This show has got to be live because we take your questions. We always do. If you're watching on YouTube, we don't take your questions, but we welcome your watching. If you want to participate in the chat, don't put crap in there. Put things that are reflective of the ethos of this platform. Peace, love, and understanding, the extension of the presumption of grace to all, except for the two people you choose to take a pass on. If you're here on the two-way platform, what a wonderful opportunity you're going to have tonight to talk to two very smart people about the Republican Party. Matt Gorman will be with us, and Mark Caputo, both already here, will be brought onto the stage in just a moment. And all you need to do to talk to them is raise your hand, your electronic hand. If you don't know how to do that because you're elderly or not that good at Zoom, maybe Google it, Bing it, follow the directions. But we'd love to have you participate. As always, we love our returning cast of thousands, but also if you're new to the platform, tonight's the night, as Rod Stewart would say. Raise your hand and get in on the action. Not much news today. Mitch McConnell fell on Capitol Hill, but he seems to be fine, according to everybody, and very little other news. So I don't have much to tell you about. But what I do have to tell you is something about being a reporter and being a good political consultant, right? They're not exactly the same, but there's some overlap in what it takes to be good at being an advisor to Republicans or someone who covers Republicans as a journalist. And I get asked all the time, who are the good strategists in both parties? What do you need to do to be a good reporter? On the latter point, being somewhat organized, being able to piece things together, being able to leverage information from one source to another, knowing how to dial a phone. These are all tricks of the trade that make people good reporters. I also say have some integrity. When I used to give lots of talks on Capitol Hill to press secretaries, they'd say, "What's your advice? We want to get good coverage for our bosses. How do we do it?" And so one of the first things I would say is, all never lie to reporters. And I'd always look around to see the room to see who would write that down. And if I saw anybody writing it down, and I always did, about half the room was writing it down. Back then, people took notes by hand. You younger people, I probably have no clue what that means, but I'd see people writing it down, and I'd say, "Don't write that down. You shouldn't need to write that down. That should just be basic." Okay. Uh, but a big thing about being a good political strategist and a good political reporter is being an anthropologist. If I were in charge of writing the business cards for one of our guests tonight, Mark Caputo, one of the best reporters in this land, I'd put in the first line under his name reporter, and then I'd put under reporter I'd put anthropologist, because part of why he's such a good reporter is he's a great storyteller and he's a great finder of facts and information. And the reason I believe, or a reason I believe, why he's so good at what he does is because he understands the anthropology of the Republican Party in the age of Trump. He understands the anthropology of Mar-a-Lago. So when sources tell Mark Caputo things, it all goes into a pre-existing framework. Now, it's not static because the anthropology can change. You introduce Elon Musk as a primate chimp into the anthropology of this community, things are going to change. Introduce Susie Wiles in a position of authority, things are going to change. So you have to be, as an anthropologist, you have to be sensitive to the community's dynamics changing, but you're always aware of the current dynamics. And so when you read someone else's reporting or a source tells you something, or you're just trying to piece together kind of the outlines of what's going on, if you know the anthropology of that community, it's a big advantage. And I talk to reporters all the time who have been on the Trump beat for years, and you can just tell they don't know a dang thing about the anthropology of Trump world, not a dang thing. I could, from scratch, write a 20-page paper on the anthropology of Trump world, but it wouldn't be as good as Mark Caputo's. And Matt Gorman, who's also about to join us as a Republican strategist, same thing. If you listen to Matt Gorman yak away on TV or speak thoughtfully here on Two-Way, see what I did there, or have a conversation with him, you can see he understands the anthropology of his party. And amongst the most talented people in the Republican Party today, as far as I'm concerned, and this applies to members of Congress and governors and Republican strategists, is those who understood the anthropology of their party pre-Trump. They understood the Bush, Romney, McCain anthropology. And then they just took the community and they adapted their understanding to what it's like now. It's not totally different, right? There are obviously some similarities, but there are a lot of differences. And the strategists who have done the best in understanding the party, which doesn't always mean they're the ones who get the richest or have the most business. But the ones who've done the best in understanding the party, from my point of view, are the ones who understand how the party has changed anthropologically under Donald Trump. It applies to the donors, it applies to the strategists, it applies to the media, the Trump media. It's a very complicated thing. And for people like Matt Gorman and Mark Caputo, it's second nature. They just understand it so fundamentally that when the community dynamics change, they adjust, but they're always working from a foundation of understanding. And I'll tell you, part of why I think, if to the extent I've had success in my career, is I understand the anthropology of Democrats and Republicans. Often you'll ask a Republican, I won't, because I tend not to do this, and I shouldn't say you. Often you'll see a TV host ask a Republican, well, what, is Joe Biden gonna resign from the nomination, step aside and not run? And the Republican will be like, unless they're one of the extraordinary Republicans who also understands the anthropology of the other party, they'll say, I have no idea. I've heard Karl Rove, one of the smartest people I know, and boy, you talk about understanding the anthropology of the Republican Party. I've heard Karl take a pass on questions about the Democrats because his view is, that's not my tribe. I don't know the anthropology over there. Okay? Understanding both anthropologies is a big advantage. It's really, again, to the extent I've had success in my career, understanding them both, being able to go back and forth, you see the asymmetries and you see the possibilities and the limits of everything. So some of you probably think what I'm saying is obvious. Some of you on the other end of the spectrum may think what I'm saying is either stupid or so obscure you don't know what I'm talking about. But trust me, you're about to get a masterclass in Trump Republican anthropology. Please bring in our two guests. I summon thee, Mark Caputo. I summon thee, Matt Gorman. Gentlemen, couldn't be happier to have you here to talk about anthropology. You guys are amongst those who laughed and said, what a stupid setup. But,
no, I'm embarrassed. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I feel I'm overhyped now, and I don't know how I'm going to live up to it.
You'll live up to it. How well do you two guys know each other?
Oh, yeah.
Well enough. Yeah.
Well enough. All right. So Mark just popped yet another story. Mark is currently writing for the Dispatch, but he's about to...
Nope, the Bulwark.
The Bulwark.
The other one.
Sorry.
The other one.
Sorry. Must happen all the time. The Bulwark. But he's about to pop over to, I'll say Semaphore, just a kid, to Axios. To Axios. I did have to look that one up because, let's face it, Matt Gorman and I, Semaphore, Axios, whatever. It could be either way. Pop up Mark's headline. So, Mark, again, people say sucking up or blowing smoke up somebody's arse. It's just fact. Mark Caputo is as good as anybody else right now covering the Republican Party. He just gets it. All right. Can we put up that headline? Do we have that headline? There we go. Here it comes. Byline and everything. Trump World's Confirmation Playbook, : Speak loudly and unleash the MAGA dogs. There is confidence in the outcome, quote, they're all going to get confirmed. So this piece tracks ahead of me because Mark's always ahead of me on these things. You take it back down, bring back Mark and Matt. One great thing about Mark that I admire is he goes where his information is. Like everybody else, he was tracking the precipice of Pete Hegseth on the precipice. Trump talking to Ron DeSantis to replace Hegseth, the defense secretary. But Mark has in a very sophisticated way tracked the fact that now not only is Hegseth looking good, but great confidence in Trump World that all the nominees are going to make it. And that's where it is. Mark's story, whether it's in the Bulwark or the Dispatch, wherever it is, just kidding. I urge you to read it if you want to know the status, not just of Trump's nominees, but again, the anthropology of things. So let's start in a place you may not have expected me to start, with the senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton, who plays a role in Mark's piece. Matt knows, Tom Cotton very well, don't you? You do. So, Mark, you first, then Matt. And gentlemen, so grateful to you for joining. I've not overhyped you. You're going to deliver. People are going to be like, man, these guys should have their own show on Two-Way or be here nightly. Mark, explain the role that Tom Cotton plays in your piece and currently in the anthropology of the Trump Capitol Hill Republican Party. Go.
Right. I'll go a little back in time before my piece. So
Yes,
last
sir.
week I was talking to people who know McConnell's thinking, and Mitch McConnell occupies still an important, very important position in the Republican conference. He is the avatar of sort of the old line Republican Party. And so there's essentially sort of your McConnellite tribe, and then there's your more, air quotes, America First tribe, where you have J.D. Vance, for instance. And straddling these two tribes within the Republican conference is Tom Cotton, well-respected, Harvard-educated, Army vet, no bullshit Republican. And what I was told by some of the people who understand McConnell's style of thinking, as it were, when I was trying to kind of handicap, okay, what's going to happen to these Trump nominees, not just Hegseth, but Tulsi Gabbard, because Tulsi Gabbard has unorthodox views, at least as far as sort of the traditional Republican or intelligence community orthodoxy, to put it mildly. Uh, what's going to happen to her? And they told me, hey, watch Tom Cotton, because Tom Cotton occupies this important space. He's on the Intelligence Committee. Tulsi Gabbard's going to have problems probably with Tom Cotton. He's the guy that she needs to woo. And Monday morning, literally as I was texting one of Cotton's people, I mean, at that very moment at 8:42 in the morning on Monday, Cotton posts, hey, look, Republican conference, we should all confirm all of Donald Trump's cabinet picks. And it was like, wow. So for me and for people who are kind of watching the Senate and watching the personalities in the Republican conference for what it's going to do, that's kind of seismic. It just looks like a normal tweet, right? Republican tells Republicans to vote for Republican appointees. Duh. But really, when you start to get into the Kremlinology, and that's probably a bad word in context, when
Trump,
you
we
get
call it the Trumpology.
the Trumpology, when you get into that, that's kind of a real sort of seismic shift. That
Yeah.
indicates that Cotton, who is also the Republican conference chair, who's in charge of messaging strategy and delivery for the Republicans in the United States Senate, when he's saying, hey guys, in the past, there have only been two Republican presidents, or better said, there have only been two cases where a
Yeah,
president's
either
party,
party. Yeah.
yeah, where a president's party has rejected their cabinet
No,
picks.
I don't even
You know,
think I don't even think it was that. I think what he said is, and I think this is right, since Bill
since
Clinton,
Clinton, that's a good point.
only a president's nominees have only drawn no votes from senators of their own party in two cases. I think
Right.
that's what he said, right?
I'm, I should probably just read it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think that's what he said.
so it was just basically one of those things saying like, look, this is my position, this is where I am. But really, what he's communicating there is it's time to move forward, not just with Hegseth, but with the rest of them, and let's just get on with it.
Yeah.
And so my story today gets into that, which is Trump world after feeling a little on the ropes with Hegseth, and Trump after feeling on the ropes with Hegseth at that initial crush of bad news that came out, and with the Joni Ernst expressing reservations, to put it mildly, about him. Last week, Hegseth turned the corner on Thursday by scolding the press for the way in which it's kind of covering him and his controversies, so to speak. And that really sort of goes a long way to sort of explaining how the Trump people just feel incredibly confident about where they are. Now, they could be wrong, but generally, there's one thing that Trump world knows, and that's the MAGA base, which has sort of taken over the Republican Party. And so I decided, yeah, I should just write a story saying they not only feel good about things, but they have reason to feel that way.
Matt, I'm going to tee you up to go in any direction you want with a couple things about Tom Cotton. Okay.
Yeah.
So Tom Cotton, and I'm going to correct Mark a little bit because I
Mm.
remember the first tweet. He didn't say let's confirm them all. He said they're all going to be confirmed. So
Sure.
right, but he's the head of the
I'm
conference.
gonna
When he
look it
says
up.
when he says they're all going to be confirmed, he's basically saying don't screw with this, confirm them all.
Okay.
But he didn't literally say
Mhm.
that.
Right.
Tom Cotton also is not reckless. There's a lot of members of the Republican conference who will tweet stuff and say stuff that's like careless. He is meticulous. When he says we're going to confirm them all, he's not just pulling it out of his arse. He's talked to people, right? He's consulted with his colleagues. In his new role in the conference, he's talking to people even more than before. The other thing I would say about Tom Cotton, who chose not to come into the administration, I believe, because he's got young kids, but who someday wants to be president. Okay. If you're a Republican and you want to keep your options open to be president someday, you have no idea what the post-Trump Republican Party is going to look like. How MAGA is it going to be? What you do know is whether you're going to be super MAGA or not, it'd be great to be able to come to New York and raise money from Wall Street. It'd be great to go to Chicago and raise money from Romney's donors, but it'd also be great to be right with MAGA. And I think what he's doing now with this is he's showing his MAGA bona fides. He's saying, I am now the guy carrying water. You didn't see John Thune tweet,
Nope.
they're all going to be confirmed. You didn't see even John Barrasso in the same way. So when Cotton does that now, Cotton will never lose the Paul Singer wing of the Republican Party. He'll never lose them because he's double Harvard, super smart, great in a conference room in Manhattan. So they're his, and they're his. That wing of the party likes him almost as much as they like Paul Ryan. I said almost as much, so the Cotton people watching will be pissed off that I said almost. They love it. He's never going to lose them. He'll never lose the ability to come to Manhattan and win. But now he's showing lots of MAGA leg. Matt, annotate everything Mark and I said, please.
Look, 1,000%. And what was the last instance where the Republicans voted against Republican nominee? That was Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski with Betsy DeVos in 2017. I'll put a pin in that for a minute.
Forgot about that one. Forgot about that. Interesting. Go ahead.
That will come into play later. Mark my words.
Take your time.
Two, you are exactly right. And one of the things I found most notable is if you'd asked me 6 months ago, what is the premier leadership race aside from the majority leader? Obviously, right? It's Joni Ernst and running against Tom Cotton for conference chair. Joni Ernst, I believe, had the position, the fourth position, so the one right under conference chair. So I wouldn't say she's an incumbent, but she had some natural advantages that would be yours to send the next position. Cotton came out of nowhere, and again, I thought he might be defense secretary, wasn't obviously, and I would say routed her for the position. It wasn't even close, and everybody knew going in, a week in advance, he was going to win resoundingly. So he clearly has those bona fides in the Senate, but you're absolutely right. There's a product of the base that needs to be kind of fed a little bit. And what do you see the weekend before the leadership contest? You start hearing little tidbits about Joni being floated for defense secretary, right? And so Cotton's opponent here, Joni Ernst, I thought in the last week said everything you need to know about where kind of the confirmation is going with this. Because look, if I was advising Joni, I would have been very clear. Look, if you have a problem with Pete Hegseth, I totally respect it. Obviously, sexual assault survivor. You have a personal kind of view on this that maybe others don't. And I'm not implying anything on the Hegseth circumstances. I'm just saying that. You need to make it clear exactly what your objection is, or get behind him, because you're getting torched every single time you are trying to define yourself, right? Like, you look at her replies to Mark's point about the MAGA base, just confirm Hegseth, confirm Hegseth, confirm Hegseth. Like when she'd be tweeting about the, Doge. And I think, in the last, I would say 72 hours, 48 hours, she met with Pete, ostensibly went well. She seemed to both in the meeting solidify her concern with what Hegseth and then remedy it in the same meeting. And then now I think he's on track to be nominated. And the last part I'll say is it's a little bit of a shell game, right? With Betsy DeVos, to go back to that in 2017, she, after Andy Puzder, who is the original Trump Secretary of Labor nominee, dropped out after some unsavory personal findings, she was the one essentially that got all the Democratic fire trained on her. And Collins knew that she was up, obviously, 2 years later, 3 years later for re-election. She needed to vote against one of the Trump nominees. Had to. They chose DeVos. So here it's a bit of a shell game. I was on Meet the Press 10 days ago. That was when Kash Patel was in the hot seat. Everybody thought maybe he's the one that's not
whack-a-mole.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, last week was Pete Hegseth. Now we're talking about Tulsi. It's this whack-a-mole game, and we still have 5 weeks or 6 weeks until these things are happening before the actual committees to get confirmed. There's no one person getting all the fire. It's all being spread out, and that helps all of them.
Yeah. All right. I want to move to a related topic that you both know a lot about, which is the Trump-DeSantis relationship. Okay. So end of last week, my best sources were saying, and I said it on this platform, DeSantis was going to be offered the job and Hegseth was going to be out by the weekend. That changed, not because DeSantis got cold feet, but because Hegseth fought back, as Mark has very well chronicled, Matt just mentioned. So now you've got this added drama of Laura Trump, who is acting like she knows she's going to get the Senate seat. That's my read of her body language. There are some people in DeSantis' world, Mark knows this better than I do, who say this is a little dicey now because if he's going to get defense and he names Laura, that looks kind of a little unseemly. And if he's not getting defense, does he still have to name Laura Trump? Right? My view of DeSantis is, again, this goes back to you cannot, if you aspire to be the Republican nominee and president someday, you have to think of how are you going to be right with MAGA, right? And Tom Cotton has some issues there. And obviously so does Ron DeSantis for reasons I still don't totally understand. But he has a major problem with parts of MAGA. Okay.
Hey, dude, you come at the king, man. You come at the king.
No, I know, but I know. So if he were Trump's defense secretary, I think that would help him. Naming Laura Trump could help him. But Mark, where are we on the DeSantis-Trump relationship? If Hegseth goes down, is it still DeSantis or is that not clear?
I mean, I would think so, but remember, you're asking me to forecast the mind of Trump in the future.
You know what I always say? It's like saying slightly less predictable than Kim Jong-un. Yes, no, I agree.
There's a magic 8-ball quality to it,
exactly.
Except the answers are infinite, right?
Yes, anything could happen. And this at this point might be a January question, which means Trump can change his mind 100 times. But as of today, and let me ask you this factual question: has DeSantis addressed a reporter question about being Secretary of Defense? I've not seen that.
Not that I have seen.
Yeah.
So
it seems odd, right? I mean, he gets asked a lot of questions typically. Has no one asked him?
It just depends. Correct. They just haven't had a shot at him. He hasn't had any public events. Maybe I could reframe your question this way.
Always
if Hegseth withdrew tonight, would DeSantis be offered the job of DOD secretary tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Likely so.
Okay.
And would DeSantis take it? Strong possibility. Now, that then triggers this whole discussion about Laura Trump. Ron DeSantis doesn't want Laura Trump to be the nominee, or better said, the Senate pick, not because he dislikes Laura Trump, but he is one of these guys who believes in certain forms and certain sensibilities. He has certain sensibilities. And one of them is that Laura Trump hasn't been here long enough and she hasn't earned it. And that's how it is. And so she can go out there and earn it in 2 years. And by the way, I do think of Laura Trump, if the dynamic is the same, of course, that's a big if. I think she would probably win that Senate race. It also would depend on who's running. So I speculate also that there is always a part of Ron DeSantis that doesn't like looking like someone's bitch. And so he's not going to want to look craven and transactional.
But there's no way to pick her without feeling that, because she just moved to the state and there's people who are more qualified.
I'm going to give away the game.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to blow a story of mine, which I was planning to write, because I think my story I just wrote is so right that my other story is never going to come to existence.
Yeah.
It's not a binary thing. Either DeSantis appoints or he doesn't. If, let's say, they're playing the long game, this is informed speculation on my part, okay, is that DeSantis would stretch out the appointment period by which to pick the Senate nominee, or better said, the Senate replacement of Rubio.
Yeah.
And remember, Rubio hasn't left the seat yet.
Yeah.
Like that happens after January 20th. So DeSantis is under no obligation to fill that until it becomes vacant. And it's not vacant right now, or it's not effectively vacant. And so what DeSantis could do is get the DOD job himself and then turn over to Jeanette Nunez, the lieutenant governor who would become governor, the appointment of Laura Trump. Laura Trump then becomes senator. Jeanette Nunez, now the incumbent governor, when she runs for office in 2 years, has the endorsement of both Trumps, President Trump and Senator Trump, for re-election. Tallahassee would love it because Jeanette Nunez is moderate in tone and sensibility. She is a known quantity. She's been in Tallahassee for a number of years. She was a legislative aide before then, worked at Florida International University. And she is much more preferred than Byron Donalds, the congressman for Southwest Florida, who, if you ask me right now, and this can change, is probably our likeliest next governor, or Matt Gaetz, who scares the fuck out of Tallahassee and everyone else, right?
But Byron Donalds is not the next governor if she's the incumbent governor, right?
Correct. That's the thing. That's what I said. Like that's if she's governor, right? But I'm saying like so that whole scenario I laid there, all those different dominoes, like that's sort of the everyone in the Republican tent wins scenario, right? Except for James Uthmeier, who was the chief of staff for Ron DeSantis, because I haven't been told this directly by him, but everybody in Tallahassee speculates it. What he would prefer is that Ashley Moody, the sitting Florida Attorney General, get appointed to the Senate seat. That creates a vacancy for Florida Attorney General, and he, Uthmeier, a lawyer, a Federal Society guy, he gets to be Attorney General for the state of Florida.
Does the governor pick that if the AG slot is open?
Yes.
Got it. And he preferred that than to be a caretaker senator?
Well, when the initial seat came open, or the knowledge of the seat came open, and when Lara Trump expressed interest in filling that soon-to-be empty seat, there are a lot of scary people in MAGA world, or as I call them in this piece, the MAGA dogs. You don't want to run afoul of the hounds of hell here. And for a guy like Uthmeier, who's a career professional, a lawyer, he doesn't want to get sideways with MAGA and take Lara Trump's seat. That's another, by the way, factor in all of this that we haven't really discussed.
Yeah, well, you just did. Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Real quick. So I, like every year, both you guys know, but the rest of the audience, every 4 years, Harvard does this big conference where they have all the campaign managers or whatever, decision makers from all the campaigns, primary and general, come to Harvard and just recap the campaign for history, right? And so I was there last week representing Tim Scott. Who was the one major campaign that was not there?
Ron DeSantis.
And it was smart move. I get it. Why relive that if you're them? It makes no sense. All you can do is harm yourself. But that did not stop the Trump campaign and Nikki Haley, but the Trump campaign was the one I'm talking about, from just mercilessly mocking them all like throughout the whole thing. It was a trend. You can tell there is zero love lost between the Trump campaign and the DeSantis campaign at the operative level, right? Again, I'm not.
And that's why the Trump people leaked that DeSantis was in on this to begin with. They didn't want him to become DOD secretary.
Exactly. And here's what I would say. I've never advised Ron DeSantis, nor does he probably want my advice, but here's what I would tell him. And I don't know Mark's sources, and so I'm not saying that irrespective of this. I'm saying in a vacuum, I would say this. Be extremely careful. This isn't Romney's Secretary of State 2.0. Where, if you guys remember back after the Trump won the first time, out of nowhere, the Secretary of State Mitt Romney rumor came. And so what did Trump do? Summoned to Trump Tower. They ate at Jean George's. There just happened to be a photographer there. And that's where you have that wincing photo of Mitt. And it was kind of embarrassing. He made him basically pledge his loyalty, says, yes, I want to be Secretary of State. Okay, thanks, Mitt. Bye. Here, Rex Tillerson, you're hired for the job. So when I also then heard that him and DeSantis are going to the Army-Navy game. So there's a photo of them together. I would just be extremely nervous if I'm Team DeSantis that I'm being set up here in a similar way that Mitt Romney was the first time around.
Oh, of course. Brilliant. By the way, on November 29th, 2016, I tweeted that picture with the caption, "What's for dinner, Donald?" Answer, your dignity. And that's what happened to Romney, right?
Yes.
So my only annotation of the brilliant stuff you just said, Matt, is that restaurant is 10 blocks from my house, and the S is silent.
Okay, sorry.
Jean Georges.
Yes.
Jean Georges.
I love it.
Sorry.
If you guys want in on this conversation, and I promised you a masterclass, and if you don't recognize it as such, you belong someplace else. Raise your hand. We'll get you folks in. I want to talk about Susie Wiles. Okay. So Susie Wiles couldn't possibly be amongst the few Trump aides who'd like Ron DeSantis to be in the cabinet. But I think from my reporting, she's willing to, if that's what happens, she'll deal with it. But here's my question. We've seen a bunch of people appointed who are, rough sledding. We've seen some chaos. We've seen the thing with Boris Epstein. This transition has been more chaotic by some measures than the campaign, at least outwardly.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So what's the deal? I know for a few days she was off, but Mark, why is Susie Wiles presiding over more chaos than she normally would?
Well, she wasn't really presiding over it is the first answer. Remember, Howard Lutnick was the transition co-chair. And that guy, according to numerous people in MAGAville, was just leaking like a sieve and just screwing up the whole transition team. They had these these different plans. We're going to roll this person out at this point, this person out. And they suspect Lutnick and a few others in his circle were just yapping away. In fact, part of Lutnick's reputation, whether earned or unearned, of being a leaker probably helped seriously cost him the Treasury Secretary job, in addition to the fact that he went out of his way to just, in a kind of an unseemly fashion, and this is grading on a Trump curve, right, of trashing Scott Bessent, I'm assuming I know how to pronounce his last name, who ultimately got the job, right?
Yeah.
So that's answer number one. It wasn't Susie's process. Answer number two, Trump, right? Like Trump had just won, right? And everyone said he was going to lose, or a lot of people said he was going to lose, and he won big. He won the popular vote, and he was feeling his oats. And Susie and Chris LaCivita and who else am I thinking of? James Blair, the brain trust of the Trump operation, was in Vegas giving a presentation to this capital management firm. The cats were away, and the mice in Trump's mind started to play. And next thing you know, Matt Gaetz, Attorney General, and all of this stuff just started to crop up. Now, that actually happened on a plane when Susie happened to be in the restroom or something, or at least in the back of the plane. But a lot of this was, sort of Trump stuff. Like this is his process, and he wanted to do it his way. And Susie was hired to be chief of, or better said, the campaign manager. And then she was hired to be chief of staff. She wasn't really managing transition stuff. And so it was sort of a shotgun wedding of these sort of different parties, maybe a shotgun polygamous wedding, if you will, right? You had Lutnick, you had Susie, you had Trump himself, and it was kind of messy.
All right, one more question, then I'm going to bring in the community to ask questions. One more from me. Matt, you first this time. My sense from my reporting is that J.D. Vance is super influential.
Yes.
He is super influential. And influential with everyone you need to be, not just with Trump, but with Vivek and with Elon Musk and on the Hill, obviously. So talk about what you know and what you sense about not just the role he's playing now, but how that will manifest itself when they take office.
I think two things. You're absolutely right. And remember, he even alluded to it, because remember when he got attacked by folks in Steve Bannon world for not showing up to vote in one of the judges, he said, I was interviewing Kash Patel or somebody to be the next FBI. No, he's interviewing the next FBI director. So he's in every one of these meetings. Yep. And number two, look, I know for a fact that he is very deeply involved now, not just with cabinet, but sub-cabinet, right? He knows how these agencies work extremely well. And I think, no means negatively, unlike some in Trump orbit, he cares how they work and where the power really resides. So if he gets a strong deputy secretary that he feels is competent and they can do X, Y, and Z in this particular area, don't down kind of cast that as a very influential thing too. And look, I think it also speaks to the fact that, as he governs, he's going to be pretty involved in this stuff too, right? He has the inherent trust, as you both know, and everybody kind of knows, of the Trump family. So, there's I don't think right now in any way there's going to be ever anything with personal, question of his loyalty. Absolutely not. And I think, again, his X factor is he can go into the public and defend this and also go on offense on a lot of these things in a way that almost no one else
no one. Maybe Rubio.
Rubio, that's it.
Yeah. That ability to make some of the most conservative right-wing stuff sound completely palatable.
Yes.
In the middle of the road is a talent.
Yes.
Yeah, he could sell ice to an Eskimo, as it were. Right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, brilliant. I'm so grateful to you for coming on. Let's go to some questions. Tell everybody where you are, what's on your mind. Barton, welcome in.
Thanks for having me. I actually wanted to ask Mark a question about a comment he made this morning.
Uh-oh.
I'm not responsible for anything I said over 10 hours ago.
Did I say something insulting you? I apologize. I
want you gentlemen to weigh in on this also.
Okay.
So this morning, Mark said he thought it was highly unlikely for Trump to arm Israel with bunker buster bombs or help Israel in any sort of
Mark, he means me, Mark, not you, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, what? I was like, whoa.
Yeah. The guy in the nice sweater that lives like next to Jean-Georges. Anyway, so Um, I think that Iran, with the Hezbollah getting knocked out and the situation they're in, might move very quickly to develop a nuke. And I don't think Trump wants to be the president of the United States that has Iran develop a nuclear weapon on his watch. I think his ego and being
Yeah, I agree. But there's a reason why we haven't given the Israelis or used them ourselves or let them use their own to go after them. If you bomb a nuclear facility to try to stop a nuclear program that way, as opposed to assassinating scientists and doing other things, you could unleash nuclear material that would blow around the Middle East, a windy place, and destroy America and Israel's chances to have positive impressions in the region for a generation. It's just a limit on the mission. Because remember, it's not like this hasn't been a problem for decades. Bombing the nuclear facilities is in theory a great way to take them out, but it's not. And that's why it's never been done. And that's why I strongly doubt it will be done. It might be threatened, but it just doesn't make sense as a mission.
Could Israel threaten or say to Trump that unless you guys help us, we'll develop a tactical nuke and we'll take it out? In other words,
you don't threaten Donald Trump, do you?
You're talking about you saying the Israelis threatened Trump to say we're going to do it if you don't help us?
right.
No, the Israelis would have done this 20 years ago if it was a mission that made sense. No one has figured out a way to bomb a nuclear facility without risking nuclear material blowing all over the Middle East. Just not possible. They'd rather kill scientists with ice bullets and all the Mossad things that they do.
Well,
So there may be look, I believe that Netanyahu and Trump will appraise on January 20th, really before. I believe they'll appraise the situation and they'll say, what's the play with the Saudis now? What's the play with Iran? What's the play with Hamas?
They're already doing it, Mark. Steve Witkoff is already doing it. Steve Witkoff is his Middle East envoy. As we speak right now, Steve is in Saudi Arabia.
And could you guys,
but what I'm saying is on the 20th, they'll take the fruits of those conversations and many others. And again, I say this over and over, Trump's confidence about how to deal with these players, particularly the ones who were in office when he was there, but even the ones who weren't, his confidence is so much higher than it was. And so he's going to say, that's why I think when the Democrats mock him for saying he's going to end the two forever wars by February, I really think he might. I'm not saying he will for sure, but he might. And I think he will make the Iranians a deal they can't refuse. Now, they may refuse it, but I think he and Bibi will make them a deal they can't refuse. Mark and then Matt.
Yeah, just real quick. I posted this. That's probably not showing up. Fuck, it's not working. Oh, and maybe it did. You see that right? You see that right there?
Right there. Right there's good.
Yeah. So if you see that, this was from an oil a firm that tracks energy, and you see how there's all of those big spikes and it goes down to nothing. That's Iranian oil production, and where it goes to almost zero is under Trump's zero, or better said, maximum pressure campaign he unleashed as president against Iran. One of the biggest underreported stories in the mainstream media.
Yep.
Donald Trump's administration crushed Iran with the way in which they stopped the importation, the transportation, the offloading of Iranian oil across the globe by using financial pressures and sanctions on private companies and on governments. That is a major tool that Trump will have at his disposal again. The Iranians were doing backflips when he was not elected. When he gets elected again, expect to see a lot of that. I think to answer your question, why not bunker busters? Because maximum pressure really put the squeeze on Iran.
Yeah,
Matt.
And look, I think Mark is exactly right. Both Marks are exactly right. And what I would say is, I'll step back from Iran and Israel for a quick second. Look at it from the other way too. The people who were in office when Trump was in office the first time, right? Trudeau, for instance, Macron. They also have a little bit more familiarity how to deal with Trump, right? I thought Macron inviting in Notre Dame was a really smart move. Trump loves that shit, right? and also, right, meeting with Prince William, not Keir Starmer, right? Again, Trump loves that shit. And this other thing is, look at the tariff fight, right? When he made threats against Canada and Mexico, Trudeau, who dealt with Trump when he was in office, immediately went to Mar-a-Lago, got in a room, got a nice photo, helped himself, I think, at home, even though he's probably a lame duck regardless, but helped get in the right foot for a deal. Scheinbaum, who was not in office when Trump was in office, sends out this very angry letter, chest-thumping letter that House Democrats then become supportive of, and it amplifies Sean Casten in Illinois. So it puts her in a very bad path, boxes her in a little bit to get a deal. So it's both ways. Trump feels more confident, and the other people know they can deal with him a little bit better.
Yep. Barton, thank you. Appreciate the question. Thanks for coming in. Very much appreciate it. All right, Albert, come on in. Tell folks where you are. What's on your mind, please?
Nevada, so just outside Las Vegas. I had two questions for all of you, actually. So with Susie Wiles as the new chief of staff, do you think that the Trump administration is going to have as many leaks as they did in the first administration?
No.
The second question is, or the second question for all of you is, what are your thoughts on the advisors, Trump's advisors? Because it didn't seem, to me at least, he had really good advisors in the first administration. So I'm curious, what do you think of his incoming advisors?
Yeah. So I'll say quickly on leaking, another really undercovered story. The combined leaking of Biden, Harris, and Trump campaigns is the lowest I've ever seen in any campaign I've ever covered. I mean, you wouldn't know there was disagreements between Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita about anything. You wouldn't know that there were tensions about Kamala Harris's scheduling. So Mark shook his head. I know he agrees. There'll be less leaking. There'll be less leaking because they figured out. Now, one thing that's not been reported, although I tweeted it out a little bit, I think, or maybe I put it in my newsletter. Who can remember? They were worried about leaking during the transition because there has been some leaking.
Yep.
And what they did was they gave the one person they suspected a false tip. They said, this person's getting this job. It was related to agriculture secretary. And they suspected that person of leaking to a certain reporter, and the reporter reported it and claimed to have multiple sources. I don't believe that reporter did have multiple sources because I believe the whole thing was a setup. So I think there'll be less leaking. Mark, then Matt, and then we'll get to the advisor question.
A main reason for no is, let's go back in history. When Trump takes office in 2017, he has Steve Bannon. He has, good Lord, why am I not able to remember? Reince Priebus, thank you. He has Reince Priebus, and he has Jared Kushner in his White House. These three guys hated each other. And
Did you say Kellyanne? What about Kellyanne?
Well, and then there's Kellyanne, of course. But Kellyanne just sort of pervades everything in an apparition-like quality. And these three guys spent more of their time knifing each other than advancing Trump's agenda. What you have in this White House is a group that was steeled by fire in the Republican primary and general election. It's by and large the campaign team. All of them know each other, like each other, and trust each other. So until shit really goes sideways, I don't see much in the way of leaking, except for sort of approved or relatively innocuous leaks.
All right, Matt, before you go, I got to share some news. Kimberly Guilfoyle, ambassador nominee to Greece. Okay. Did not see that one coming. Did not see that coming.
Jr.'s got a new girlfriend, so
yes, there you go.
One, you know?
Yes.
And did you notice, I mean, as you know, that was an open secret, the fact that DJT Jr. and Guilfoyle had broken up for a long time about Mar-a-Lago, but it became confirmed really about 3 hours ago? So they had to get that done first.
Daily Mail. Yeah. Andrew Ferguson is, as long discussed, going to be named to head the FTC, and Tom Barak is going to be ambassador to Greece. So there you have it. Matt, talk about leaking and then talk about the overall staff.
Yeah, look, I will say this. There'll be more leaks than obviously the campaign because it's a bigger audience, right? Like the amount of people that will know more things in an administration is more, right? So the leak will come from Treasury, not the White House Chief of Staff's office. That's number one. And number two, you're absolutely right. Like both Marks. I think LaCivita called Susie mother at this Harvard conference. Like they really do like each other. And also on the other side with Kamala's team, like this was like, again, it was after the campaign. You can show a little more leg. They acted as if they were on the presidential debate stage. It was stilted. It was painful. Like they couldn't even concede when they thought Joe Biden's this bad debate was a problem during the course of that night. Like that's how like still they were and still disciplined. So transfer that discipline from an after the fact post-mortem at Harvard to in the middle of a press campaign leaking. I could see why it was not fruitful for you guys in the media.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think of the overall quality of the staff as compared to Trump 1?
I think it's, I mean, it's cliche to say, by far the most professional operation. Wiles and LaCivita could have retired the day before joining Trump's campaign and still been accomplished operatives in this. So, they obviously need Trump, like in theory, but like they didn't need him to make a living, which too many people, I think, in the first time around did. And I think they're really good. These guys are good. And they
but not now. I think Albert's asking about the administration, not the campaign.
Oh,
but
like in terms of the cabinet, you mean, Albert?
Yeah,
like just the White House.
like
in the White House
and the cabinet and the White House staff.
Yeah, look, I think these guys are pretty good. I think these guys are pretty good. I mean, certainly some of them are. They're not like it's Rubio is kind of more the establishment pick, but like for example, I was talking to somebody today who there's a lot of underrated folks who a lot of folks in town speak very highly of, and don't be surprised if they have unanimous confirmations, like a guy like Chris Wright in energy. Folks who, again, they're not flashy names, but they're smart, they're good names.
Mark,
what specifically?
well, just overall, and Matt raised a good question or a good point, which is a lot of the lesser known cabinet secretaries and a lot of the people who've been named for the sub cabinet, the deputy, and some of the associates, and they're very, very good people. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's two ways to look. Obviously, there's your secretary and then there's your undersecretary. And what do all of Donald Trump's picks and possible picks for secretary have in common? They're all big names, splashy names, big personalities with large social media followings, whether it's Hegseth on TV or Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor who ran for president. So he's going for flash and kind of style at the top level. It's that undersecretary level that is going to be staffed by highly competent people. I think what Feinberg, the Cerberus financial management agency, or whatever the name of the hedge fund is, he's going to be the number 2 in charge of the Pentagon. And you're going to have a numbers expert go through the biggest pot of graft in Washington, the $800 billion defense budget. So you're going to see a lot of things. I think there's going to be a higher degree of competence than certainly the first Trump administration, and higher than I think a lot of people are expecting, because unfortunately in our kind of simplistic media world, we're like, oh, well, Pete Hegseth's just a Fox host, and therefore the Defense Department's going to be run by a drunken idiot. And, that's not going to be the case. Now, I'm not promising that everything's going to be great, but I think things are going to be a lot more competently run than critics think, and perhaps than critics hope.
And real quick,
they're hoping for some failure,
I can't also underestimate the fact that, look, first time around Trump gets elected, so many Republicans thought, hey, it's an aberration. Let's just wait this out. I'm not going to join the admin, or I'm not going to kind of get involved. I want to keep a little distance, right? Yep. This is the party now. This is not it's clearly not an aberration in the slightest. So you are going to get, I think, people of really high quality too, across the board, people who wouldn't join the administration the first time, saying, hey, this is the party now. This is how I make my living. I'm all in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also a movement, right?
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, I misspoke. I said Tom Brock's going to Greece. That's where Kimberly Guilfoyle's going. Tom Brock's going to Turkey, not to Greece. For those of you playing along at home. Albert, I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to unmute you. Albert, you ever go to Penn and Teller? You ever go to the Penn and Teller show in Vegas?
I have not gone to the Rio. No, I don't.
All right, how about Ziegfeld and Roy? Do you ever see them?
I don't think are they still alive?
I think one of the guys died, didn't he?
I mean, in the old days. I mean, before. Did you ever see him?
No, we moved from California 2 years ago. It was the best move we made.
All right, I just want you to know that back east, Matt Gorman and Mark Caputo are known as the Penn and Teller of political analysis.
Well, now I have to go see them. Now I'll have to go see them at the Rio.
They're very good at the Rio. Albert, thank you for joining. Appreciate the very thoughtful questions. Thank you.
I'm the short guy in the Penn and Teller thing, by the way.
Yeah. I like the card tricks. The card tricks are excellent. All right, AJ, welcome in. Tell folks where you are. What's on your mind, please?
Oh, mute, unmute,
yeah,
unmute.
There you go. Unmute. Don't do it again. No more toggling.
Paul Gilmore's Ohio.
Yes, sir. Paul Gilmore's Ohio. Happy Gilmore, we call him.
Huh. Yes, sir. On the conversation of health insurance and those kinds of things, I would
Yes, sir.
encourage you to look up Dr. Kevin Smith of the Oklahoma Surgery Center and look up uncompensated care fund. Aside from that, if Trump wants to go down as a legend, as a president,
And he
in his
does.
yeah, right. In his third year after the midterms, I would suggest starting Nuremberg 2.0, appointing Chief Justice, or not Chief Justice, but Clarence Thomas to oversee it. Maybe get some of the attorney generals or somebody else to be something of a jury, I suppose, and actually plead guilty then himself for all the COVID things that went down.
So Trump should form a Nuremberg trial for himself?
Yeah. Well, him, Fauci, Birx, Pence.
But he should join them in admitting culpability.
He should be the first one.
He
on
would
the
never
docket.
do that. I don't
Yeah.
like. I don't see Donald Trump admitting
But
fault
But
for
then
anything.
AJ, what would he get out of it?
he'd be like Washington, right? He doesn't want the office anymore. He lets the vice president become president, run as the incumbent then in 28.
All right, AJ, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on an Arlen Specter-like diagram and bring it to you tomorrow night. Thank you, sir. All right. You guys, I confess, I need more time to process that. All right. Oops. Did the wrong thing there. Richard, come on in. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Hi, I'm Rich from South Florida. And
Were you in my class, Rich?
I don't think so.
Okay, sorry.
It's been a while since school.
There was a Sussman. Yeah, I had a Sussman. You look just like him, so I peered to.
We're everywhere. We're all over the place.
Many
Particularly
Sussmans.
South Florida.
Yes.
Land of Sussmans.
If you go to the bagel place and you're waiting for your order and they say Sussman, you gotta say, is that the raisin bagel with cream cheese? And you say, no, I got the one with the light cream cheese.
Sesame vegetable cream cheese all the time.
There you go. All right.
Boom.
Richard, what's on your mind, sir?
I'm neither for or against Hegseth, but since I watched two-way, it occupies a lot of my brain space. And if I was him, I would make a bigger argument against the current SecDef, Lloyd Austin, who's overseeing, I think, what could be considered a bit of a crisis in recruitment, morale based on the environment that he's created. And for a Washington, D.C. that talks a lot about combating China, that is currently losing a naval blockade to the Houthis. I think there's a really good argument to be made that a shift in culture is good for the DoD. There's a lot of changes. And if he's the cheerleader for that, it's probably a good thing. And I'm just curious on what your thoughts on that are.
You've heard that from MAGA, not just for him, but you've heard it for the Attorney General slot. You've heard it for HHS. They say, you think our nominees are horrible. They're way better than the incumbents.
Right.
And MAGA loves that. It's like, oh, wait, we're going to replace Lloyd Austin. Who cares who it is, as long as it's not Lloyd Austin? So I agree. Matt, what do you think of that as a talking point?
You know what one of the most effective talking points when they wanted Joni Ernst to vote the right way again on P. Hegseth was? Well, you voted for Lloyd Austin, so you're going to vote for Lloyd Austin, but not P. Hegseth.
100%.
And literally, I think I'm looking at right now, Mike Lee, he got 2 no votes, Mike Lee and somebody else. So, that is also, I'll say, when we were on the road, I was traveling with Tim Scott, critiques of the DOD not having enough soldiers, the environment, foster the DEI stuff. That was a huge thing that resonated, especially in Iowa among primary voters, so people get that. And so, that Lloyd Austin thing is a potent argument for
shift in culture.
And you will be pleased to know that he is saying that. Behind closed doors, he is saying that, and in dribs and drabs in some of these capital gaggles with the press that's chasing him around, those are things he is mentioning. That's part of the hymnal that he's singing off of.
And I have a secret weapon for him for the women in combat talking point.
He already backed off it.
A little bit. I
Oh
thought, but
yeah, yeah.
No,
you know,
he said he's not against women in the military. He didn't say he's not against women. He's
Fair,
for
okay.
women combat.
So-
There are
with the lowering of recruitment numbers, there's been also a lowering of standards, and there's also been a equalizing of standards of men versus women. And if you just create one standard, there's no argument. There is just a standard. You either meet it or you don't.
regardless of gender. Yeah. Richard, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. Mark Caputo, why is President Trump, well, I shouldn't say why he's in a good mood. It's obvious why he is. What these days is putting him in a bad mood?
Boy, that's a good question. I haven't heard any stories of him losing his shit. So
Yeah. He's
that's-
generally in a good mood, but he's obviously
Yeah.
always worried about some things.
I would imagine when they forget to bring him a Diet Coke quickly enough at Mar-a-Lago, that might be the yeah. I mean, it's amazing when you're there how there are these nonstop wait staff that are walking around with constant cups of glasses of ice and a fresh Diet Coke for him. But on a serious note, I know he was annoyed with Hegseth, hence the call that he made to DeSantis, because he felt, I am told, and his transition team felt, I am told, that Hegseth was not completely honest with them about that incident, which I'm hesitant to call it a sexual assault because when you start to look at the police report, you can see why he wasn't charged. But nevertheless, it was a police report about a sexual assault, which he denied and said was consensual, and he wasn't charged. But nevertheless, apparently Hegseth didn't disclose, hey, look, this woman accused me of sex assault. It was consensual. And oh yeah, I engaged in a settlement with her where we both kept quiet and I paid her money, right? Like those are things he should have said that he didn't say. And Trump was kind of annoyed by that. And he thought, well, this guy's not going to make it. So he picked up the phone like, hey, Ron, remember we were talking in June about Secretary of Defense? Yeah, let's have that conversation again. Yeah.
I'm still confused about, and again, because Trump has such strong feelings about alcohol use, the guy did a podcast interview where he talked about having an alcohol problem. And then he said, oh, I never had an alcohol problem. And he obviously didn't disclose. He said it on a podcast. Now, maybe he's telling them privately, I said it for dramatic effect. But he said himself to Will Cain on a podcast, I had a problem. So and then I thought when Hegseth's lawyer told the Washington Post, I think it was what Post, it might have been the New York Times, that they didn't disclose the California alleged sexual assault because they didn't think that was something that needed to be disclosed. I thought that would bother Trump. But whatever. Gentlemen, couldn't be more grateful to you. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll come back.
Not long enough. Not long enough. Only
exactly.
An hour.
I mean, when I see Matt Gorman doing like a minute 30 roundtable, sharing a minute 30 with 3 other people, I say this is a waste. This is a waste of a great mind. And instead, now we get Gorman and Caputo unplugged, unleashed, and unbowed. So I love it. I hope you'll both come. Unconquered. I hope you'll come back regularly. Mark Caputo, good luck at Semaphore, Axios, wherever it is you end up working.
The hell it is.
And
I'll see you guys.
And, thank you both. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody, thank you for joining us. Thanks for the great questions. I'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time. A guy named Sean Spicer will be here. A guy named Dan Turrentine will be here. Hopefully all of you and many, many more tomorrow 9 a.m. for the morning meeting. And then tomorrow night we'll be back here reconvening, and who knows what will be in store for us. Thank you very much. Good night and good luck.